So can we start?
Just a minute, just.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, we can start.
Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Deepthi Shankar, and I'm an independent research consultant based in Bangalore. And today I'll be handling the session on minorities, citizenship, and multiculturalism. So historically, we know that India has been a country which has experienced excessive inward and outward migration. We have witnessed many communities which have moved into India from different parts of the world and settled. And eventually they have been internalized and assimilated in the Indian culture and the state. So in this course titled Diaspora in India, there will be discussions about different diasporas which have settled in India. So just for the benefit of everyone, let's have a brief recall of the preceding unit, the contents which were covered in the preceding unit. So I understand in the preceding unit, there was discussions on the conceptual framework on diaspora formation, especially focusing on concept of pluralism. And there were discussions on the Indian society and how it has been practicing the pluralism. And we comprehended the diasporic role in promoting a plural society in India. And there were debates about inclusions and exclusions with an example of case studies of Hapshis, Siddhis, Portuguese, and Parsis diaspora in India. So basically, what we try to understand in the previous unit was this: we try to understand the historical and the contemporary dimensions that were related to identity of the diasporic groups. We try to understand some of the key terms like pluralism, nationalism, and internationalism. In the current session, we try to focus on understanding the key terms like minority, citizenship, and multiculturalism. Hence, even the title of this unit itself follows like this: minority, citizenship, and multiculturalism. So first, we'll try to understand the term minority, and we'll try to understand diaspora as a minority. We'll try to understand the features of diaspora minority communities, and the role of migrations in minority diaspora formation. And later we'll try to understand what is citizenship, the nature, forms, and types of citizenship. And then we'll move on to understand the last term. That's for today's objective, that is multiculturalism, where we try to understand the relationship between multiculturalism and diaspora, integration of and assimilation of minorities in a multicultural society. And also we'll try to understand multiculturalism in transnational place, whether it is sustainable in the current societies, in the contemporary societies. So these are the broad objectives or what we are trying to see for the next 30-40 minutes. And thank you for being here today with us. So let's try to understand the first term, that is minority, diaspora as a minority. So before that, let's try to understand what is minority itself. See, minority can be defined as a group of people united under common ethnicity, religion, and language, and who are numerically inferior to the rest of the population. And it's also important to understand the formation of diasporic unit. How does the diasporic unit get formed? Basically, there are groups of people who move from one geographical area to another geographical area, that is from one country to another country, where they try to live in community in enclaves. And they tend to segregate and differentiate themselves from the rest of the people or the majority groups, thus leading to both geographical and psychological distancing. They maintain some kind of distance from the majority of the groups in the land. So this is done basically to have a communal feeling of security and safety, and to create intra-bonding of community of themselves, because this is essential for them because they moved on to a new land and they want to feel secure about it. So when such group lives longer in a given geographical area for a considerable period, then they tend to form diasporic group. And these diasporic groups differentiate themselves on a basis of race, culture, language, etc. And they continue to maintain the distance from the majority of the groups. And that's how it gets formed. The formation of diasporic group takes place. And later, they also might pose a challenge to the host country, because, the it is outside the purview of the host country's control. So, and then comes the issues of where the states starts using strategies of trying to internalize them to citizenship, which we'll discuss later. As of now, we're trying to focus on the term concept and the formation of the diasporic group. So this labeling of the diasporic status to a group of people, thus is a result of the demographic movement. Had these people been living in the same place, that their original land, from time immemorial, sharing the same language, culture, and religion, then there would not have been minority group creation, nor would there have been diaspora formation. So that's predominantly, it's a result of a demographic movement when they move from one geographical place to another. And irrespective of all diasporas, whether it's ethnic, religious, or professionals, etc., they are minority in origin. So estimates show that around 20 to 20% of the world's population live under minority status. And further, the scholars have been also pointed out that this concept of minority could be either self-imposed or imposed by the outside forces. Like the whole concept of minority could have been imposed by the diaspora themselves, or it could have been from the outside forces, maybe it's a state or the majority group. So it depends upon who is a diaspora and the features of diaspora and the context where they live. So further, the safety and the security of the majority on the principles of non-inclusion, non-discrimination, and non-assimilation. It's important that the majority groups should be able to retain their individuality, and hence they should not be forced as a part of a policy, state policy, to be assimilated with the rest of the majority group. Instead, they should be integrated with the majority group under a common law, which gives them enough freedom to maintain their own individual identity and practice their culture and customs. So this kind of integration actually facilitates the existence of a pluralistic societies. So the best example of diaspora communities in India are the Siddhis, which are also called as Habshis, and the Parsis. I'm sure you've heard of Parsis. It's a classic example of the diaspora community in India. So let's take this example in detail. See, these Siddhis, we are talking about Siddhis now, Siddhis, which are also called as Habshis. And apparently these Siddhis and Habshis are the tribal people of Afro-Indian origin who have settled in India and been assimilated to the Indian culture. And they live in a coastal Karnataka, Gujarat, and they're also found in some parts of Andhra Pradesh. See, most of them are Muslims and few have been a recent converts to Christianity. See, genetically, these people, Siddhis, are aligned to the DNA of the Bantu tribe of Africa, faraway land of Africa. And interestingly, the large number of Siddhis tend to reside in coastal Gujarat. You may find them in big numbers in Jamnagar, Rajkot, Surendranagar, Bhavnagar, etc. And because they have been living there in Gujarat for such a long time, they have been assimilated and have become a part of a Gujarat cultural landscape. And the Union government of India and also the Gujarat government have actually included them in the scheduled tribe list in order to empower them and also make them more mainstream with the majority of the people. So in order to put them into the mainstream society and also to empower them, they have included in the scheduled tribe list. So this is a classic example of how India has made efforts to actually internalize and assimilate the demographic and the diasporic groups into the part of the society, and also give them citizenship rights. So we just took on one example for you to set the note for the discussions. And it's also important to know that migration is predominant factor in the formation of all of the diaspora. So because these people moved from different land and came to India and they settled, and because they were living in several centuries in India, and eventually they were assimilated to the Indian culture. But it's also important to know that this diasporic formation is very slow and protracted. It may take several years, decades, and also centuries. So that was the case of the Siddhis. It happened, it was more than several hundred years for them to be a part of an Indian mainstream society and enjoy the rights of the citizen. So most of the diaspora actually live under minority status. If you take the example of Indian diaspora, in most Indian diaspora who live in other countries, most of them are in minority status, except with few exceptions. For instance, Mauritius is an exception because about 70% of the Mauritius population are of the people of Indian region. So, barring this country, this example, this case, most of the other countries, in other countries, Indian diaspora is an minority. For instance, it constitutes 2.3% of total population in UK, 4.5% in Canada, 1% of the US, and 14% of the Netherlands, 17% of South Africa, and etc. So invariably, diaspora are the minority group in most of the countries where they have moved and settled down. So let's also take an example of Jews, because whenever we're talking about the role of migration in diasporic development or the diasporic formation, it's important to remember Jews. Jews can act as a classic example for a student for a student to understand and comprehend the role of migration. So I'm sure all of you are familiar that how Jews have been constantly moving from one part of the geography to other part in search of their homes. So historically, Jews have migrated over the period of 2,500 years to various countries. And this is so because they were exiled not from their homeland, that is Israel, but they were exiled from other countries too, where they had migrated to settle down. So there are more number of Jews living outside Israel, which is their imagined and mythical homeland. For instance, Israel is a home to 30% of Jewish global population, whereas US holds more than almost 50%. Like 51% of the Jewish global population is in US and not in their homeland, because they have been migrating. They have been moving from their homeland to settle down to other countries. Whereas France, Canada, and Russia holds 3% each, and UK has 2%, and the other countries have 1% each of the Jewish global population. So this is so because of their minority status, they have felt the need of a separate homeland. And this is very normal because they want to feel safe, they want to safeguard their freedom, and they want to enjoy their social, political, and economic rights. And because of that, they are in constant lookout for the homeland, and they are making efforts to create a home wherever they migrate. But despite living for centuries in different countries, they were granted citizenship very late, which are years much later. For instance, US granted them citizenship only in 1789, irrespective of many years of their migration to that country. And France granted them citizenship in 1791. And the other European countries granted them citizenship in the late 18th centuries. And Russia in the 19th century, very late, 1970. So that has been the story of the Jews and how the role of migration is very important to the formation of the diasporic groups. Now, wherever Jews are, they are a very interesting diasporic group, and they have maintained their identity and the cultural ethos and ethnicity. So now let's move on to the concept of citizenship. In its most rudimentary form, citizenry is similar to tribal communal living. See, a member of tribal community is expected to serve the community and be loyal to it, right? So he's expected to perform certain rituals, respect the symbols, follow the norms and customs, and swear to live by it. And he has to follow this. If he fails to do it, then he might be outcasted. So it's a give and take. Tribal member respects the tribal community, his a group, and likewise the tribal community, the tribe also protects him and works. Both of them work for each other's welfare. In its modern form, the symbols of affinity can be seen through national flag, anthems, and other nationalistic icons. So in Greco-Roman civilization, the tribal affinity as a form of citizenry was extended to larger geographic and demographic areas. And it was soon followed by written norms and to the present-day constitution, where citizens enjoy the rights and privileges. So the relationship between the citizen and the state is very much similar to the relationship what the tribal member has with this group. So we see that basically the idea of citizenship has historically evolved over a period of time. It's as simple as it is if you look at it in its very rudimentary form. But it's very important to understand that the concept of citizenship and the concept of diaspora are different. There is a difference in it. So if you look at it, the citizenship is a very immobile concept, whereas the whole concept of migration and diaspora are very mobile, and the very word is suggestive of its mobility. Citizenship on one hand refers to a territorial belongingness, whereas diaspora is a deterritorialized phenomenon. Citizenship binds people, it binds mobility, and it binds migration. In its purest form, citizenship wants to actually bind people, wants the people to be in its territory. And whereas the diaspora frees them from the boundedness and offers the individual an opportunity to have the multiple belongingness. So basically, migration and diaspora hinders homogenization and exclusion of categorization. So citizenship can also be both inclusive or an exclusive process. See, citizenship of some states can be acquired, while in some cases it is inherited by the virtue of belonging through an ancestral lineage. The state, especially the liberal democracies, are expected to provide security and rights to its citizens, which include freedom of expression, freedom of livelihood, and freedom of religion, etc. And citizens, on the other hand, also have to contribute to the welfare of the states. But citizenship can alienate and assimilate the group of people irrespective of whether they are migrants or diaspora. Hence, it is both an inclusive and an exclusive in its disposition. So the best example of this inclusive and exclusive process of citizenship can be seen in the case study of Rohingya Muslims refugees who live in Myanmar and the Tibetan refugees who live in India. They're a classic example to explain this exclusive and inclusive process. We'll take them up one by one. These Rohingya Muslims are the minority community in Myanmar. So they have been living in Myanmar for several centuries. Actually, over 1 million of Rohingya Muslims. See, of the 54 million people who live in Myanmar, there are about 1.3 million who are Rohingya Muslims. Actually, what happened was after a military crackdown and an attack on the Myanmar's military post, there was millions of Rohingya Muslims who fled to Bangladesh, Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia. And further, they also became stateless in 1982 when the citizenship law in Myanmar refused to give them citizenship rights. Because of the amendments, the changes in the law, they were no more entitled to become a citizens of Myanmar. So as a result, they were not issued passports by Myanmar, and hence they were unable to legally migrate to other countries. And United Nations described them as a most persecuted minority in the world. In India, there are about 40,000 Rohingyas living in different parts of the India as refugees, and we can find about 300 to 400 in jails. These people are in jails because under the Foreigners Act, some of these Rohingyas Muslims were detained in Assam Silchar detention center in 2012 because of the illegal entry into foreign land, because of their illegal entry into India. And I'm sure all of you are aware about the Citizenship Amendment Act, which was passed in 2019. And interestingly, this act, CAA 2019 of India, does not grant citizenship to Muslim asylum seekers, and hence these Rohingya Muslims are nowhere in the picture where they are not entitled for the citizenships. So as a result, the government of India is making an attempt to deport them to Myanmar. And this act is also applicable in Jammu, Kashmir, Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, because this holds a sizable Rohingya population. And further, India is also not a signatory to the Refugee Convention of 1951 and Refugee Protocol of 1967. Further, it does not recognize the refugee cards issued by UNCHR, the United Nations Higher Commission for Refugees. And hence, India is not obligated to provide any kind of citizenship rights to Rohingyas. So this is a classic example to explain how citizenship can act as an exclusive process and they treat the diaspora minority in a different way. Let's now take the example of Tibetan refugees, which will give a different perspective of the way the citizenship process can be looked at. The most Tibetan refugees arrived in India after the failed revolt against the Chinese rule in March 1959. The event actually led to the flight of Dalai Lama, and around 8,000 Tibetans sought refuge in India and other neighboring countries of South Asia. According to the Central Tibetan Authority CTA survey, there are around 1,027,935 Tibetans registered in the diaspora, and out of which about 94,000 are in India. Roughly about 94,000 and more are in India, and about more than 30,000 and about 1,000 odd are in Bhutan, and about 18,000 odd are in other countries. And India, they are housed in 53 settlements across various parts of the country. The Tibetan diasporic communities all over the world regard India as a second home. So let's see how the law treats Tibetans as. See, Tibetans were actually, when they arrived in India, they were given identity certificates which granted them all rights as Indian citizens, except the right to vote and to right to the government employed. Incidentally, when they arrived, they were recognized as foreigners and not as refugees. And hence, they were not able to make own property, and also apply for the government and the private jobs. However, after 2014, the qualified Tibetan professionals were offered the opportunity to take jobs were offered the privilege to take up jobs in both government and the private sectors. And the Indian Citizenship Act Amendment 1986, not the recent one, granted them the citizenship for those born in India between January 26, 1950 and January 1, 1987. And as a result, a large section of the second and the third generation Tibetan refugees were eligible for Indian citizenship. But there are several debates regarding the clauses of obtaining Indian citizenship, and it is contested. This is so because, unlike many other refugee hosting countries, India did not adopt the policy of integrating Tibetans into a mainstream Indian society. Instead, it facilitated the preservation and the promotion of their distinctive culture, tradition, and identity by setting up separate Tibetan settlements in various parts of the country. I said earlier, they were housed in 54 settlements. So this is what India did. They set up Tibetan settlements, and then they were made to reside there. So that was a policy adopted by India. And one of the biggest settlements is in Dharmashala in Himachal Pradesh. That's the largest Tibetan settlement. And the second largest Tibetan settlement can be found in Mysore, near in Bailkoppa, near Coorg. So I had an opportunity to visit both of the settlement, and it's worth visiting, especially for a student of diaspora, because every Tibetan settlement, individual Tibetan settlement, can be a case in itself, and they're also treated as an visitors paradise. It's really very interesting. If you have an opportunity to be that part of the India, don't miss of visiting this Dharmashala and also this Bailkoppa, where Tibetan settlements is very famous. So what India did was, where other countries had a different policy to when other Tibetans also moved to other countries to settle down, but their policy was different. But India had a different approach, and it established separate schools for the Tibetan children and allowed the functioning of the Tibetan government in exile to manage this affairs. So this is an interest. Hence, this Tibetans in India is a very interesting case, or to see where the citizenship can be an inclusive process, and it's a classic case for the students of diaspora to really go in detail about it. You may actually further, we are not doing justice for these cases because we have very limited time, but you can further read in detail about it later whenever you are interested about it with other sources. So moving ahead, see, broadly, there are different types of citizenship which can be categorized. Like this jus sanguinis, where individuals are given citizenship based on the relation of blood, parentage, and heritage. And jus soli, where individuals obtain citizenship based on being born within a political territory. And the jus matrimony, where citizens get citizens to individuals who marry people who are already citizens. So basically, in the first form, in jus sanguinis, the individuals are given rights based on the relations of blood, parentage, and heritage. And this is a cultural, racial, and territorial concept and it's a concept of inclusion of outsiders. You can see there's a concept of exclusion of outsiders and the immigrants. The best example which offers this kind of citizenship are India, China, and South Korea, whose citizenship is based on the history of belonging. In jus soli, the rights of the soil, where he looks at the rights of the soil, where an individual obtains citizenship based on being born within a particular territory. Here, the US, Canada, Germany, and Israel are some countries which offer such kind of relationship to the people of its territory. And the jus matrimony is another form of citizenship, where by the virtue of matrimonial alliance, an individual gets citizenship. And naturalization is another form of citizenship, whereby an individual becomes a citizen in a natural course of time based on either a long-time residency or the matrimonials. So this form of citizenry is a most recent origin and can result from the transnational movement of people crossing borders for work, business, and for other reasons. So basically, we saw that citizenship can be got through birth, through acquisition, through marriage, and through naturalization process. So the fourth one we are yet to discuss, that is the transnational citizenship. So basically, there are different types of citizenship, and we discussed, and these are the jus sanguinis, jus soli, matrimonial, and naturalization are the four types. And the fifth type is extension of citizenship, which can be in a form of dual nationality, dual citizenship, and transnational citizenship. First, we'll discuss the dual nationality and the dual citizenship. See, when migrated people over a period of time got naturalized in other countries, there emerged a need to respect their political rights, both in the host and the home countries. And it found its expression in dual nationality and dual citizenship. This Tamil Indian diaspora in Sri Lanka, they got naturalized eventually in Sri Lanka. This is the best example. And not just that, even several other Indians or people of Indian origin who have moved to other countries have eventually got naturalized. Those who moved to Malaysia and other countries have been naturalized in other countries, and on the basis of dual nationality and dual citizenship. Hence, this dual citizenship and nationality has become very popular and a very common feature in the 21st century, because people have been extensively moving across the territory, across the territories of the countries for the work purpose and for other for the economic reasons in search of opportunity. And hence, due to the mobility, it has been a very common feature. But there are distinctive difference between the two terms, both the dual nationality and the dual citizenship. Dual nationality on one hand extends certain rights and privileges to diaspora, but debars the political rights. On the other hand, dual citizenship extends voting rights, making the diaspora an integral part of the political process. So in the case of the dual nationality, it extends certain rights and the privileges to the diaspora, which may include unlimited visit to the home country, the right to own property, and carry out business. But it doesn't give the political rights. But the dual citizenship, besides these other privileges, it extends voting rights and making the diaspora an integral part of the political process. So they have the right to vote and right to context, and they enjoy other political rights too. About 64 countries offer dual citizenship across the world. India, on the other hand, only offers dual nationality through its Overseas Citizen of India OCI scheme 2003. India broadly categorizes its overseas citizens in three ways, namely person of Indian origin, PIO, who are a part of the old Indian diaspora, non-resident Indians, that is, who are formed post-independence. Basically, these are the people whom we refer as NRIs living in Gulf countries and other developed countries like US, UK, and Europe, Australia, and other developed economies. The other category of OCI is a most recent origin. This forms a predominant form of the India's diaspora citizenry. Now, it's important. The extension of citizenship has also resulted in transnational citizenship. See, the concept of citizenship has undergone major changes in recent times because of the liberalization, globalization, new means of information and communication technology, etc. And in order to accommodate multiple identities with the political rights at more than one place of residence, now there's been talks of providing non-territorial and extraterritorial citizenship at multiple sites. As a result, now both home and host countries have now begun to provide citizenship to the people who are living beyond the territory of its sovereignty. And a new form of transnational citizenship now is based on a very broad premise where the rights and obligation of the citizenship change when the individual leaves the territory of citizenship, but they do not disappear altogether. See, now we move to the third concept, which we're supposed to discuss today, that is multiculturalism. See, if you look at the way we are progressing, first we talked about diaspora. First we talked about diasporic minority. Then we talked about citizenship, because the talks about diaspora eventually led to the discussions about citizenship. And when the host countries and the states start providing citizenship of different types in order to assimilate and in order to engage and to involve the diasporic communities, they also have to prepare the stage for it. And that can happen through multiculturalism. So in a modern democracies, there are deliberate attempts to either integrate or assimilate diasporic minority groups with the native majority. Okay. If in the absence of the multicultural society, the whole strategies of providing citizenship may not be successful. So it's very important these host societies have to create a multicultural society before they start actually providing this opportunity of dual nationality or dual citizenship or transnational citizenship. And accordingly, it is happening that several host societies and the democracies are attempting to either integrate and assimilate this diasporic minority in different ways. So this multiculturalism is largely based on the principles of where they treat all humans as equal and does not discriminate on the basis of gender, race, or sex. And it is race, caste, religion, or nationality. So multiculturalism believes that people from diverse background and ethnicity can cohabit creating a just society, just and a democratic society. So if you look at it very carefully, all the three concepts, minority, citizenship, and multiculturalism, are closely related and have a bearing on each other. Each one leads to another in one way, actually. It's also to further understand about this multiculturalism, it's important to understand culture. But you know that the culture is a very, has no definitive definition. And however, some of its vast, broad features include common language, shared history, and geographical belonging and bonding. While these features constitute one set of culture, multiculturalism refers to the coexistence of several cultures. So thus, there is an element of distinctiveness in each culture, but are not a compartment separating one culture from the other. The boundaries between the cultures blur, with some common features encompassing all cultures. Monoculture, which is in contrast to the multicultural societies, believes in the dominance of one ethnic or the religious group over the other. So hence, the host societies and many democracies have set the stage of creating a multicultural society. But it's also important to understand the integration and assimilation of the minority diaspora in the multicultural society. Although they are making several strategies to include them through exclusive process or inclusive process, but theoretically, scholars have actually compared these strategies, this integration and assimilation process of this diasporic minority with a melting pot and a salad bowl. See, in melting pot, what happens is the various cultures are liquidated and mixed to form an altogether new ally. This new ally, the social group, loses its original character and culture. So the best example of this melting pot is in America, where the people from different parts of the world have moved in, and people with different parts of the world and who are from different cultural baggage and background have moved into America to create a new culture, so new American culture, what we call as. So this is a perfect example of the melting pot. So the existing elements in the melting pot assimilate, get influenced, or altered by the new elements. On the contrary, the integration or the salad bowl example is like various fruits and vegetables. When put in a fruit bowl, each retain their usual taste, original taste and flavor, and at the same time coexist with each other. So Tibetan refugees, the case of Tibetan refugees in India is a perfect example of this integration process, how they were integrated. They live with the society in the society, but they maintain their original identity, and they still have this original flavor, cultural flavor. However, scholars have critiqued the models of assimilation and integration on the grounds that they are forced and include artificial attempts to homogenize the diverse societies. See, multiculturalism has found fresh grounds in US and UK because of the ideological shift in both the policy and both in the polity and the society. For instance, in US, the civil rights movement has led to the extension of equal rights to Black citizens, and this has forced American societies to actually extend or recognize the Black society. And in UK, the influx of the immigrants from the new Commonwealth was a turning point in integrating the diverse group of people which are ethnically and culturally different from each other. And this has actually added a new dimension to the demography of both US and UK. And the expulsions of the Asians from East Africa also has added a new dimension to multiculturalism, to discussions of the multiculturalism. And the excessive immigration to the UK, US, Australia, and other societies, developed societies, actually have altered the receiving countries' societies and culture. So this will take us to understand the multiculturalism in transnational space. So we understand the new global order of multiculturalism has actually decoupled the territorialized nation state. It is now allowing people of diverse citizenship and culture inhabit a common space. But it doesn't mean that these individuals lose their identities. Rather, it helps them in revitalizing the new connections. In a transnational space, multi-centrality of the identities flourish due to the new social, political, and cultural situatedness. Further, the explosion of hybridity has become intense in the metropolitan centers of US, UK, Canada, etc. And the new inhabitants of these urban spaces actually maintain affiliation to both the countries of origin and the countries of settlement. So this is a characteristic feature of any transnational citizen or a transnational migrant. He or she makes sure that they are connected and they maintain affiliation to both their host and the home countries, the country they come from and their homeland where they come from, and the country to which they migrated, that is country to which they have settled. So they maintain affinity connections to both, which means that if they do not just maintain the affinity, they also contribute to the both countries for the development purpose. So that's a characteristic feature of these transnational citizens and the transnational migrants, which are found in the new inhabitants who reside in these urban spaces and maintain the affiliation to both origin and the settlement country. So the new centers of urban culturalism promote rural differences. So we're trying to understand these transnational spaces. How does this multiculturalism function in a transnational place? So in these places, there is a positive acceptance of religion, cultural, and racial differences of all the inhabitants. Here, the minority rights are given a proper space in the governance. It refutes racism, ethnocentric domination, and also the majoritarian demography. It refutes a majoritarian demography too. So ideally, it celebrates the differences that result from race, culture, religion, gender, and sexuality. So host countries are actually making deliberate attempts to incorporate multiculturalism through suggested gestures. The best example is when the US President Barack Obama celebrated Diwali in 2009. So this gesture of his not only added credibility to the US state's policy of multiculturalism, but also made American Hindus feel at home in the receiving countries. So not just America, several other countries have made these attempts to incorporate multiculturalism and make the diasporic communities feel at home in their own respective countries. But it's not free from criticism. Multiculturalism is not free from criticism. So critics feel that multiculturalism prevents development of pan-ethnic consciousness because individuals here live and act a scripted identity of the group rather than express their individual creativity. It builds, and hence, in the process, it builds a false and narrow fixed identity based on ethnicity and fails to develop a broader pan-ethnic solidarity. And it's further critic that multicultural practices actually just manage the cultural and racial differences. And in the process, conceals the dominance of one community, which means the dominance of the community exists, but it just gets concealed through these multicultural practices that takes place in host countries. Further, it's also critic that multiculturalism avoids questioning the false hierarchical Western religious model. For example, the perception of the Christianity being superior to other tribal religion is hardly put into discussion according to the critics. And critics also feel that the policies of multiculturalism initiated by some of the first world countries are in a way to serve its broader economic and diplomatic need. They feel it's critic that most of the developed economies which talk about multicultural policies actually serving their internal agenda, which is more beneficial to them rather than to the diasporic community or to the developing world. That's in a nutshell the broad criticism of multiculturalism. So to take forward, we would just conclude with the multiculturalism itself. For instance, we understood the features of multiculturalism, and we also understood how scholars treat and criticize it. But the reality is that multiculturalism has been under severe threat during the terrorist attack. If we recollect the racial targeting of South Asians post 9/11 in the US, suggests how religious identities become an easy markers of differentiation. So this threat is not just from the public, but also from the states who promote essentialized identity. There are several countries who promote essentialized identity. So the threat is not just from public, but also from the full-fledged states. So this racial attacks and discrimination does not just harm the minorities, the diasporic minorities, and the host country, and it harms both the diasporic minorities, host countries, and the entire world, the world in the broader. It affects everything is related and it is connected, and so the entire globe is affected, and the entire world is affected. So these it mobilizes the victimized ethnic groups, making the host country a contested site in the long run. So this is what happens. This is actually the reality. Although the multiculturalism is very there is a positive side to it, and it looks it looks so perfect, especially when it is promoted by and developed countries. But on the other hand, the reality also speaks of speaks of a different story, and which has to be really thought about. So with this, I would like to conclude. But before closing up, I'll just sum up what we discussed. If you recollect, we talked about diaspora. We talked about the three concepts: diasporic minority, citizenship, and multiculturalism. We understood what is diasporic minority and the formation of the diasporic minority, and then how the diasporic minority are included or excluded by the state and the host societies through the exclusive process. Then we talked about citizenship, the different types of citizenship, and the strategies which this is citizenship which is being used as strategies by different host countries through, and as a result, there are new forms of citizenship which has resulted: dual nationality, dual citizenship, and transnational nationality. And that led us that opened up to the discussion of multiculturalism, which is essential for the different types of citizenship to thrive, and for the diasporic minority to really exist in that space. And we talked about the features of multiculturalism, and also about the criticism and the current reality, the reality, and whether this multiculturalism is sustainable in this contemporary societies. So with this note, I would like to close this session. You are free to ask any questions and have any queries. So please feel free to raise any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. If anyone has any question, so briefly we can do this question answer session. Actually, our next speaker, Dr. Malingam sir, is already there, so we have to give his also. So Swadesh, Nirmal, if you have any question or anything you want to know from ma'am, please be quick. Swadesh?
Or
Nirmal?
Or maybe they can pose the question.
If you want, you can also pose the question so that we can mail it to ma'am, or we can WhatsApp her so she can reply to your questions. Vijaya, do you have any question?
Yes, sir. I have a question. Actually, I have some network problems, so I was not able to listen to ma'am properly. But okay, the topic I understood. Let's talk about the latest current issue is going on in Manipur about the Métis community and the other community, the problems and notes. Is it related to, this also we can consider as a citizenship issue or a multicultural issues?
Yeah, but I'll just quickly answer this question because we are cutting into the next session. Thank you for the question. You're talking about Rohingya Muslim, right?
Yes, ma'am. So I'm asking about the same. In Manipur, the issues are going on currently. Yeah,
but specifically talking about Rohingya
who mingled
Muslims,
with
I just
the localites, and they are saying that.
Yeah, so just to answer you shortly, see, in this case, we just took that we actually maybe missed that part of my the talk. we took the case of Rohingya Muslims, actually, of how citizenship can be an exclusive process. See, according to our CAA, our Citizenship Amendment Act 2019, it does not provide rights to Muslim asylums, okay, Muslim asylum refugees. So it's very clearly Rohingya Muslims are excluded from it. So in that context, we use that. So other than that, they don't come into the picture at all in this talk. But your question is larger. But yes, there is they're all very correlated. It's connected. But we use Rohingya Muslims in that context to explain that how they are excluded in the process.
Okay, ma'am. For a short briefing, I'll just try to get some notes from internet.
Yeah. And what you can do is you can just post the question and probably Firoz sir, Sadaran sir, and we can take it later. Yeah, but to quickly answer you that yes, we use this Rohingya Muslims case in this talk. I don't know whether you're able to get through that.
Well, ma'am, I will go through with the recorded session. I will watch again because I'm having network issue and your voice is also breaking. I'm not able to clearly listen your words. So thank you so much, ma'am, for answering my question.
Sure.
So Nirmal, do you have any question?
No, sir.
So if anything will be there, ma'am, we'll let you know. If they will post the questions, then we'll forward it to you.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Firoz sir. And also thanks to Sadanand sir, Dr. Sadanand.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
So Mahalingam sir, now the floor is yours now. You can start your mic and camera.
Yes, I'm going to start. Give me a second. Thank you, Feroz. Nice to see you on screen. How are you?
Thank you, sir. Fine, sir. Fine. How about you?
Yeah, you are able to hear me well. I mean, I'm just going to open one more, window.
Okay.
Because
No, your voice is visible, clear.
No, I'm just preparing my meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Your voice is echoing, sir.
yeah. Now it's fine now.
No, sir.
Echoing, voice is echoing.
I think it will do. Just give me a second. Now is it fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. It is fine.
Let me open my video also and let me just start. It's fine. Okay. Let me just start sharing the screen. My screen is being, shown, I think. Yes, should be there. Okay. Just give me a second. Okay. Yes. So, good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you all back again. So I'm going to today speak on approaches to diaspora studies. This is your block 1 core concepts, unit 3, which is about approaches to diaspora studies. So before I begin my lecture, I like to know, because you have been doing diaspora and migration and you're familiar with these concepts. So let me just get the feel of the class from you by interacting with you. So tell me something about what do you know about diaspora? How, I think you must have known many definitions by this time. So any one of you can come forward to tell me what is diaspora, and then we will discuss about approaches to diaspora studies. Okay. So with that, let me begin my class. So who's going to respond to me? There are 8 people in the class. So Nirmal or Swadesh or Vijaya and Kirti, whoever. Just can you respond? Yes. Yes. Nirmal, can I have your opinion on this? Swadesh also is there. Vijaya is there. Yes. Come on, speak up. Huh? Nobody's responding. Are you all there or not? There is chat box. There is a message. Okay. Yes. Vijaya, can you respond? What is diaspora? See, because why I'm asking you, because before I start about the approaches, you should know what is diaspora. I think you know, we must be knowing it. So I want your response. I mean, not only you, I want all of your responses. Can I have your response here? Nirmal, Sudesh, who's going to speak to me? See, the word diaspora comes from, diaspiro. It's a Greek word which means to show over. But the word was, later referred to, the Jews' migration because of exile. You know, you must be knowing the story of Jewish migration because it was a forced migration. This word against, diaspora was extended to other, diaspora as well, like African diaspora, as well as later American diaspora. Then now this word has lost its meaning because of its inclusiveness and also its wide usage by referring to various kinds of migrations and various kinds of migrants. Okay. And also the phenomenon of diaspora is very dynamic and complex. So you need different approaches to understand, diaspora. See, approaches means there are 2 kinds of approaches. Okay, methodological approaches and theoretical approaches. Okay, so these approaches uh, by which we could understand any phenomenon, like, all the social phenomenon, all social phenomena is, understood through 2 approaches, in as part of academic studies, methodological approach and theoretical approach. That's where we differ from journalism. Academicians, we have to use this, paradigm to understand any phenomenon. Okay, so any social phenomenon. Clear now? So what I'm saying that, see, approaches means how you look at it. Okay, and how you're understanding a phenomenon, how you're understanding a social phenomenon, approaches.
or how you are trying to understand a phenomenon, or how you're trying to unpack or study, explain, describe, analyze a phenomenon. Okay, so there are two kinds in academic, literature. That is methodological approach, theoretical approach, by which you try to understand a social phenomenon. So today I'm here to discuss with you approaches to study, approaches in diaspora studies. Okay, what all approaches are existing, okay, in diaspora studies, or you can say, you can put it this way as well, how diaspora was understood by using different approaches. Okay, so it's kind of review, okay, review of approaches to understand diaspora. Okay, so I hope you are understanding me where what I'm doing today, what I'm doing here. That is, I'm trying to explain to you what all approaches are available to study the diaspora, and how diasporic scholars have understood by employing, by using different approaches. Okay, so clear now? So at least now can I get response from anybody here in the class? I think some of you, if you respond, will be good for me. I'll also get motivated to go further. If you're not speaking up, then how would I think? Then I should not speak to the mute participants. I should speak to the live participants. Okay. So who's going to
sir.
respond? Yes.
Sir, actually, diaspora came from the Greek word that is diaspora, which means to scatter, and actually it was referred to the Jewish migration, their
Yeah.
forced exile from the place, and later on it was used to Armenian diaspora who were forced to migrate from their land due to the Ottoman rule, and later on it was used to um, other cases such as of the Indians and the Chinese, etc. And in the
Yes.
case of diaspora, there are two kinds of, that is the homeland as well as the host land. And the homeland is often considered as the mythical land, the imagined land, and which is the ideal place. And they always want to return to their homeland, as in the case of the Jewish. And these are the basic aspects of diaspora. And various scholars like Rohin Cohen and Safran has theorized about
Yes,
the
yes, Nirmal, we will discuss all those, theoretical understanding on diaspora. It's good. I think Nirmal spoke. Nirmal, you speak from where? Punjab, no?
No, sir, from Kerala.
So you're from Kerala. Okay, that's fine, Nirmal. Thank you for your response.
Thank you.
So actually, basically, Nirmal, approach means, how you try to understand a phenomenon, how you are trying to study that phenomenon. That is called approaches. There are two kinds of approaches, okay, methodological approaches and also theoretical approaches, okay, which may vary from, studies to studies, okay. So, which I'm going to explain today, what all approaches were used or existing to understand diaspora, and also what all approaches were used by diasporic scholars to understand diaspora. Okay, that's fine. So the definition diaspora has changed from 1960s to, again, like, it refers to exile group, overseas ethnic communities, racial minority groups, and so on and so forth. Let us discuss some important aspects of how the phenomenon of diaspora is looked at over time. Okay, from approach changed over the time and space. Approach also have changed, to understand diaspora because of changing nature of any social phenomenon. Approach also will change. Let me explain various theoretical approaches over the period and also the global events that shaped the diaspora imagination and their interrelationship with host, homeland, and on transit as well. Okay, so the various approaches to understand diaspora. You know very well, it's not a monolithic category. It's a diverse term. It's a very umbrella term. Okay, the term, it refers to historical experience and also identity issues, language, nationality, economy, ideology, all that. Okay, but here there are so many approaches, but we are discussing only 4 approaches which are major in nature, which evolved in the context of other parallel progress in the area of political economy, technological revolutions, and global events over the last 3 to 4 decades. Okay, there are many approaches, but we are just taking up the major 4 approaches which were, employed to understand the diaspora of various global diasporas by diasporic scholars. What are those approaches? Classic class perspective, ethnic and religious perspective, linguistic and national subnational perspectives, and nationalist perspective. Okay, these are the 4 main approaches, okay, by which diasporic scholars, they were trying to understand the dynamic nature of diaspora, okay, of various diasporas. What is class approach? They use class paradigm, to understand the diasporic communities who scattered around the world, various parts of the world. Okay, class approach, Marxian approach. Okay, using the class paradigm. Diasporas in any countries are not uniform categories. These diasporas, they also have a class within themselves. For example, in colonial period, most of the migrants from India, they were just belonging to the unskilled laborers and you can say working class category. Okay, they went and settled in various parts of the world. They became a diasporic minority, and also the link between India was not that so strong, like the migrants who are going to Western countries. They are from upper middle class, and they have a good connections with the homeland. As Nirmal said, diaspora is always, linking back to the homeland. That is the main criteria, or to call a community maybe imaginary or it may be real linkages between host land and homeland. That is what a community can be called diaspora community, because of this kind of, linkages, connections with the imaginary homeland or real homeland. Okay, so class approach tells us, to understand the various classes within the diaspora, how they are, the level of engagement with the homeland. Okay, this perspective tells us, what groups are more connected, who are more connected with the homeland. Okay, so class perspective tells us that thing, to us. The variety of classes within broad communities and their composition, destination countries, resourcefulness, and transnational engagement varies. So it depends on the class. For example, a working class Indian migrant cannot, have a close links with the homeland because he lacks resources. And also this linkage is also based on the policy of the host land also. Okay, so that is the aspect you have to understand. The next one, the different class of diasporic communities have not only different level of access to their culture, transnational linkages. I told you, they're all based on your class, where you are located. If you're well off in a host land, then you can easily connect back to your homeland and you can participate actively in various groups and your links are very stronger. Okay. For example, case study of the Indian diaspora. The Indian diaspora in Silicon Valley, mostly they are from upper middle class, will have a more privileged access to the transnational resources of economic, political, social than the labor migrants from the Gulf countries. Okay, so the class perspective gives you, gives an idea how or who are all connected with the homeland. Okay, so that is help us to understand diasporic phenomenon. There are labor organizations in Gulf countries based on class and caste also. Okay. Then coming next approach, ethnic religious approach. Diasporas often identify with religion and ethnicity. What is ethnicity? The cultural differences. Ethnic approach has its own limitation because it only can focus on the process within the nation state. See, ethnic approach, this cannot capture the process of the transnational process within the community, diasporic community. Only it can analyze, it can bring out what all processes are going on within the diasporic community in a nation state. Okay, how culture is maintained, how they are identities, maintained by the diasporic community. This kind of ethnic or religious approach will help us to understand how diaspora or within the process, social process within this diasporic community. But this approach cannot give us the linkages between homeland and diaspora. I hope you're getting it, what I'm saying. Okay, the ethnic and religious approach is good to understand the process within the community, but it cannot give us the big picture about the transnational aspects of the diaspora. That's a point, I want to make it clear here. The next one, further, there were two ways of looking at cultural identity. Firstly, in terms of one shared culture, which is collective and people with same ancestry hold within. So diaspora communities are constantly producing and reproducing themselves anew through transformation and difference. Okay, so that's what I said. Diaspora is a very dynamic it's a dynamic one, which is a multidisciplinary in nature, very complex phenomenon. They are like in the middle. They are sandwiched between homeland and hostland in terms of their identity. Okay, so it's you need a very strong all kinds of approaches to understand this phenomenon. Class approach, ethnic and religious approach. Okay, and you have different kinds of where there are various approaches like essentialist approach and non-essentialist approach, to understand the phenomenon of diaspora that you need, to understand this complex phenomenon. Next is linguistic subnational approach, which means diaspora, it's not only connecting to the homeland, they're also connecting to the region where they come from. Okay, and also the language to which they belong. The real strength of diaspora community and the linkages with the home countries are all regional, subnational, and linguistic level. The classic example of such diaspora communities is mostly found in countries like India. Diaspora is more pronounced in the regional level, like for example, Sikh diaspora, Punjabi diaspora, they are very connected to Punjab. Telugu diaspora is connected to Andhra and Telangana. Tamil diaspora is connected to Tamil Nadu, like that, regional connections. Okay, that's what the hometown connections. Okay, so this approach will help us to understand where they are connected. Okay, where they are contributing back, how they are, what are the linkages between them and their hometown or the region. That's what this approach also will help us to understand the ongoing process within the community. Okay, often these diasporas go antithetical to the pan-national identity. History is witness to Khalistan movement. Okay, for example, Khalistan movement is today also is much more in the news. Okay, the Sikh diaspora wants to create a separate independent nation state for themselves. Okay, and LTT of Tamil diaspora is a classical example for this kind of engagements at the regional level. Okay, which is opposed to the pan-Indian identity. Okay, there are transnational networks of Telugus, Gujaratis, Tamils, Punjabis. These regional linguistic identities have played a prominent role in local politics, economic development, philanthropic engagement in the home regions. So this approach will help us to understand these kind of engagements with their region, with their respective region. Okay, clear? So now the coming to the fourth one, the major approaches. There are so many approaches, transnational approach. Okay, there are so many approaches. For social movement approach also is there to understand the diaspora phenomenon. So we are just picking up only the major ones. Nationalist approach. Diasporas are creation of cross-border migration, and hence nation or nationality is a very core of diaspora identity. Okay, so Benedict Anderson, who theorized the nationalism and imagined community, observed that long-distance nationalism of diaspora, is a means of strengthening the identity in the host land. Okay, digital technologies have further actuated the national sentiments of their respective diasporas and homeland. See, the long distance nationalism means the diasporas connections, diaspora politics from host land towards homeland. Okay, which is like, for example, this long distance nationalism of Sikh diaspora has led is promoting the Khalistan movement in various parts of the globe. Okay, that's what long distance. The social media often worked as the mobilizing platform to diasporas to spread worldwide to connect with the nation. So nationalist approach is trying to understand how the diaspora, for example, a Sikh diaspora as a nation, and how they are connecting back to the homeland. The nationalist approach will give us that perspective. Benedict Anderson talks about long distance nationalism, which is almost similar to the classical understanding of nationalism, but people, they share a common history in the land. The only difference is remote from the country of origin. Okay, that's called long distance nationalism. So this kind of approaches will help us to understand the various process within the diasporic community. Okay, it's not a new phenomenon, but most of the diaspora communities, such as Mexicans, Armenians, Indians, Hungarians, Greeks, Irish, many others have already, practiced long distance nationalism. That's what is long distance nationalism? That is the diaspora's political activities towards their homeland. Okay, that is called long distance nationalism because they are not here, but still they are having political activism in their homeland to create separate homeland, or to go for a civil war, or to support the terrorist movement, or to support the religious fundamentalism like Islamic fundamentalism or Hindu fundamentalism. Okay, that is what long distance nationalism means. Okay, then what are the factors which are influencing these approaches towards diaspora? There are several factors. One is social media is very helpful because of the growth of information technology, which has revolutionized the economic political activities. Okay, and the everyday experience of diaspora. This social media is very helpful to spread their political ideas, their grievances. Okay, they are people easily can mobilize through this social media. That's called online digital mobilization to to push their agenda. Okay, and to get their opinion, public opinion, consensus for their vision or objective. A recent data by Kepo's analysis published in that dataportal.com states that there are about 4.48 billion people are using social media today. Okay, today the digital divide is of course is there. Digital divide is in narrowing. Okay, it's shrinking, but still it is there. But still people start using digital technologies, and it's easy to spread any ideas on social media today. Diasporic communities, so these kind of see, these are influencing our approaches to understand diaspora. Okay, for example, the digital approach, or you can say like technological approach will try to help us to understand the technological connections. How technology is promoting diaspora connections will help us to understand how technology is playing a very important role in sustaining culture of the diasporic community, all that. Okay. The political economy approach, the rise of Asian countries, a new power has changed. Asia is emerging like China and India. So these also, diasporas look back towards their homeland today. They also, look upon their homeland for various support in the host land. The rise of nationalist movement, rise of economic and political clout also further accentuated the politicization of diaspora. Okay, for example, rising India has given them hope, to fall back on India for any kind of support. For example, today India image is growing. The image of India is growing. The world circle, world countries looking upon India was resolving world issues, global issues. Okay, so which gives them a boost, for diasporic community to get politicized in their home host land. Okay, and also today, because of this globalization, the privatization, liberalization also has, these global economic processes also have really brought the diasporic community closer to the homeland, and of course, in addition to the technological advancement, the multi-sided politicization of diaspora is due to many factors. As diasporic social formations are consolidated today because of these developments, inspired by success in Israel, India, China, and various attracting diasporic investment. Many countries have today they have a special economic plan for diasporic communities. They welcome diasporic investments for its own growth. Okay, homeland governments are crafting enticements ranging from dual citizenship. They are willing to give them because they want to, take the support of the diasporas, for the growth story of any homeland. So there are two cases with Chinese and Indians. Okay, for example, the Indians have supported India in health, development of health sector, development of IT sector. China, though you must be knowing, the Chinese diaspora is very much, playing the important role for the growth of China, economic growth. The Chinese diaspora have invested heavily in China in various manufacturing sector. The Chinese miracle is because of Chinese diaspora. Of course, India still could not win the Indian diaspora to invest in the industries or such kind of economic investment, but only thing IT sector, we have received good response from the diasporic community, and they really helped the Indian IT industry to grow. Okay, and health sector, like starting global hospitals, like for example, Medanda, or you can have Apollo Hospital. They're all from, diasporic NRIs who just came back from diaspora, and they just started this kind of hospitals, health sectors in various cities. Okay, and homeland governments are okay. This is backside. Okay, now China has experienced one of the most remarkable investment from the Chinese diaspora. India has been successful in what? Attracting diasporic human capital in information technology. Human capital, okay, which healthcare and education sector, they really is promising. And also global events and diaspora. Okay, the global events have really these two 1911. So 9/11 changed the perception of many host countries' population towards the immigrants and refugees. After this 1911 attack, okay, the host lands became very strict, and they started, strict measures for immigration and all, and also, the diaspora communities were seen as a threat to the national security. Okay, the xenophobic Islamophobia started. These things are also affected on their engagement with the homeland. Okay, so this is also, these events also influencing the approaches to understand diaspora. Okay, see, there are many anti-immigration movements and xenophobic attacks. Approaches to diaspora studies have also increased in many parts of the Western countries. from last 2 decades because of, see, the approaches will change according to, changes which are happening in the diaspora community. It's not a, it's not a template. Okay. Approaches will vary according to changing time to understand the phenomenon. Okay. See, the approach which was used earlier could not be used now because diaspora has moved on. Okay. You can't use those old approaches. Okay. That's what. Approach is also very dynamic, like a diasporic, a diaspora phenomenon. South Asian, especially Sikhs and Muslims, were targeted in US, other parts of the world in the post 1911. So that is what, these racism towards Indians in Australia, these things you'll be knowing it. The Filipinos attack in Gulf, a lot of things, which really these events have impacted on the diaspora relations with the homeland and also their migration pattern. That's what you have to use approaches according to changing pattern. Then Rachel Gillam, in his study on Muslims in post 1911, found out, how the negative political rhetoric around Muslim Americans persist. So that is what you must be knowing a lot of, approach. This is see whatever I've discussed so far is the methodological approach. How methodological approaches have changed over a period of time. Okay. Now coming to theoretical approaches to understand the diaspora, the homeland, hostland relations, and who were the, the diasporic community. I mean, who could be called diaspora? Okay. The academic approach to study diaspora has changed over the time. Broadly, there are two different ways to view these approaches. That is idealistic notion of diaspora, that is Jewish model. In this theoretical model, diaspora is perceived as a victim. This idealistic notion of diaspora, this Jewish model, Jewish theoretical model, which says diaspora is a victim. Diaspora community is a victim one. Okay, because who are the diasporas? Those who left the homeland by force, forced migration, and they lost their homeland and scattered across the world, and they're trying to, create a new homeland for themselves. So that was the early model, theoretical model. Okay, so as present day, we have inclusive approach that includes all international, migrations. Okay, migration like refugees and migrants, all that. In this approach, the approach is widely used over the period. Now, almost all today, everybody is called diaspora. Even a refugee, but also a voluntary migrant. Everyone is, called diaspora, inclusive approach. So William Safran was the first one to, define and identify that, who are diasporas, what are the attributes of diaspora. Well, he was the first one to speak about that. He identifies 6 major characteristics of quality of diaspora. They are displaced community is dispersed at least 2 environments from the original homeland and have the following criteria to qualify as diaspora. Okay, he has given the checklist. Okay, what attributes will fit in for calling a community as a diaspora community. The community keeps memories, visions, and myths, okay, about the original homeland.
Sir, you are muted.
Yes, now that's what I wanted to know.
Okay.
Ek minute.
Okay, sir.
So you can hear me now?
Yes, sir.
And my video is on.
The PPT is on.
Video.
Video, I have to check 1 minute. Yes, it is.
Okay. So I'm discussing the theoretical approaches now. See, the earlier discussion was about methodological approaches, how diaspora could be understand from different points of view. Okay, which we discussed. Now I'm moving into the theoretical approaches, where I just started discussing William Safran, how he, identified, okay, who could be called diaspora. Okay, according to him, he has given, 6 categories, 6 kind of attributes. Okay, if a community keeps memories, visions, and myths about the original homeland, that can be called as, diaspora. If a members of a community feel they are not fully accepted by the host community, okay, in the end, they think they will return to the land where they belong to. Okay, that is third one. The fourth one, if they participate in the maintenance or restoration of this homeland. If the consciousness and solidarity of the group is defined by the relationship with the homeland. So this Safran's definition is about Jewish experience. Okay, he theorized how Jews, faced the forced migration and how, what all, process within the Jewish diaspora. Okay, and by looking at Jewish experience, he theorized, okay, this approach. This approach tells us the forced migration of Jews and also the creation of Israel and all that. Okay, so diasporic community. The next one is Kim Butler defined diaspora's framework for the study of a specific process of community formation. Okay, Kim Butler talks about how a community is formed. Okay, so he has given the framework to understand diasporic community in a host land. Today, it is used to describe the population which is considered to be deterritorialized and transnational. Today, diasporas are supposed to be transnational community and also displaced. Okay, it is a group which has its origin in a land other than their homeland in which it currently resides and whose social, economic, and political networks cross the borders of nation states, indeed span the globe. Okay, that is what a diaspora means. Okay, then Stephen Wertowerk has given 3 meanings of diaspora. He has theorized who can be called as diaspora. Diaspora is a social formation which refer to the experience of the Jews and their traumatic exile from the historic homeland and the dispersal throughout the world. Okay, that is, how diaspora is a social formation. Okay, this form was later applied to the American African diasporas. Okay, the forced migration model. Next is diaspora. Also, a community can be called diaspora if they have a consciousness of what diasporic consciousness means. They're having a transnational links with their homeland. Okay, that is called the diasporic community. Then diaspora as a mode of cultural production. Various cultural, identities are maintained by diaspora by replanting their, homeland culture or replicating their homeland cultural life in the host land. Okay, if they maintain or if they identify as separate, okay, that is what diaspora means. So that is what Stephen Wetterwork has identified. But Stuart Hall has offered an important insight in diaspora. According to him, the identity which does not fade even after their hybrid. Okay, diaspora is always a hybrid one. They're not like pure original, because they live in a host land. They will assimilate, they are acculturate with the homeland culture. So they are always hybrid in nature. But even then, they are reproducing their own culture, and they're themselves different from the host land culture. That's what Stuart Hall is trying to understand diaspora phenomenon. Okay. Another definition, diaspora is very important, given by, G. Skeffer, Gabriel Skeffer. He says, modern diasporas are ethnic minority groups or migrant origins residing and acting in host countries, but maintaining strong sentimental or material links with the origin country. That's what those people could be called as diaspora, according to G. Scaffer. That is, particularly modern diasporas are very closely connected to their original homeland because of globalization and also advancement of technology, which has brought the diaspora closer to the homeland. Okay, clear. It should be clear to you. Okay, such conceptualization was criticized by various scholars because this homeland, emphasis on return to home has been criticized by many scholars. For example, Safran is conceptualized mainly based on Jewish model of classical notion of diaspora. The term diaspora has very limited applications at that time. Okay, so that's why now we have more, what is called dynamic way of understanding diaspora. That is called, you call it, the essentialist. They were trying to understand diaspora in a very limited way, but constructionist, their approach is very really, they have given us wide scope to understand diaspora very comprehensively. For example, the social movement approach is also very helpful to understand the various movements, how these movements are uniting and bringing the diaspora community in the host land, and how they are, provoked to fall back on the homeland. That kind of, discourse also, to understand the diasporic phenomenon in the host land. In a way, the idealization of home does not correspond to any kind of home anywhere in late modernity. So where symbolic or real boundaries of space and privacy are blurred. Today, for example, due to nation state is breaking up because of this globalization, all that. But still, diaspora phenomenon is always connected to the original or the imaginary homeland. That's what, many, if you look at all these people theoretical approach, one thing you can easily find out, they always talk about the homeland orientation of the diaspora. That is very important, criteria by which a community can be called diaspora. Nostalgia, strangeness, the sense of loss intensify the efforts of making a home. Okay, that is what people like Massey Cohen tries to further to make the term more flexible to adopt to other communities. Okay, see, Cohen tries to further make the term more flexible to adopt the other communities as well. Okay, see the Saffron, and also, the big, these people know they were just using classical Jews model, but Hogan's model is very broad, inclusive, to understand the various processes within the diaspora. Okay, if a group of people is separated from their homeland to work or to trade by other colonial aspirations. Okay, and he talks about voluntary migration. Cohen's definition covers the voluntary aspect of movement. The members of a group have collective myth and memories about their country, location, history, achievements. This one. Next, the third one, he says, a group contributes to idealization, sustenance, restoration, security, welfare, even creation of an imaginary homeland. Okay, if a group supports a collective return to the original homeland, if there is strong ethnic consciousness, depending on a long-standing feeling of being different, a common history of destiny, okay, within the migrants. And also there's a problematic relationship with the host society in relation to a feeling emanating from the lack of acceptance. Okay, these are all factors which can be, identified within the diasporic community. Okay, there's empathy and solidarity with the other members, okay, of the ethnic group. The group can develop a tolerant, diverse, creative, and enriching life in the host country. The diaspora is in constant search for a place where it will reconstruct its past, imaginary, and future identities, roles, rituals, and beliefs. That is what diasporic reality. They live in past, the same time they look into future, okay, to reconstruct the identity. Okay, for example, Paul Gilroy and James Clifford have paved the way for this non-essentialist understanding of diaspora, which focuses on migrants, cross-border linkages, flows, and circulation and practices of establishing social and symbolic ties rather than relying on notions of fixed connections. So that's why I said essentialists, they look at fixed connections, but non-essentialist theorists, they try to understand diaspora by looking at the, flows, the process, transnational process, circulations within the diasporic community. Okay, so identity is continuously mediated, reconfigured by different representations like language, practice, memory, fantasy, and so on. So Indian diaspora during colonial time is not the same as the recent Indian diasporas in USA, Gulf countries. I told you, it all depends on the various factors like its location, class, the policies of the host land, resourcefulness of the diaspora, all that. The profile of diaspora also very important to connect back with the homeland. So diaspora is also a category that implies multiple connections across space. Diaspora is not a place, a space. Diaspora is spread across space and flows of ideas and information beyond a singular nation. That is called diaspora. So there are a lot of works by these scholars. Okay, so I've covered two kinds of things today. Theoretical approaches to understand diaspora and also methodological approaches to understand diaspora. Then coming to conclude, see, diaspora research has evolved over the last few decades. It has grown up. It has picked up from 1990 onwards. That is the time, this globalization, liberalization, and all started. Diaspora connections have increased. Because of that, diaspora studies also have become very popular. Only 1990s onwards. The place related analytical model and longing to return to no more control to the diasporic imagination. Now, the diasporic imagination is today continuous process of creating and recreating a shared diasporic space for dreams, fantasies, and visions. Today, diaspora, it's not possible to create a nation state or whatever. But now diaspora process is a continuous one, creating, recreating their homeland culture in the host land, rather than creating a separate homeland for themselves. Because today multiculturalism is practiced in many host countries, unfavorable policies for the minorities over there, which makes diaspora to stay comfortable, not to always to return to their homeland, which if it is not available, they don't want to create today. Today, creating a nation state is not an easy task. So diaspora also has realized, and now, they want to create their home within the host culture. That's what now you have to understand. And most powerfully, even violently, the diasporic imaginary emerges from the intersection of global transnationalism and re-nationalization. Okay, the interconnectedness, okay, today has increased because of this reconnectedness, national imaginary. So these things have really grown up because of development of, this communication and also structural shift in the host lands. Okay, so there are various methodological approaches, theoretical approaches to understand diaspora. And by using those approaches, we could easily comprehend the process, the happenings within the diasporic communities around the world. With this with this, I just try to conclude. Now I'm ready to take up your questions, if any, and let me just close my screen. Yes. I start. The floor is open for question and answer session now. Anybody? Any questions? Feroz, any questions from?
Sir, Vidya has opened her mic.
Sudesh
Sorry.
is there.
Always I'm the one who asks questions. So now this question is for Mr. Swadesh. If you
No
answer, it
question.
will be very helpful for him. As a student, it is for me like a case studies, I can say. Let's take current issues, sir, and let's take today's issues. What is the role of diaspora in today's Karnataka elections and its results?
Oh God, political diaspora.
Of course, because sir is the right person to answer for us, because I'm student and you are leading a team. So we need someone, intellectual who can answer.
So the question is to Sudesh or to me?
Yes, sir. No. If you answer, it will be helpful for Swadesh. And as a student, of course, it will be a case studies for us also.
Yeah, Sudesh.
What is the role of diaspora
Sudesh
in
is an activist,
Karnataka
you can
elections
tell
and
us.
results?
Sudesh, we are looking for your response. We are waiting for your response. Yes.
No questions from my side, but today we got good idea about approaches, different approaches for business and some Silicon Valley that people can interact with the white collar job holders, Telugu associations, many working in US and Australia, Canada, UK. We got very good idea, sir. What are the approaches in diaspora?
Today, I want to ask you, what is the meaning of approach? Like, what is I explained in the beginning? So tell me, what is the meaning? Approach ka matlab kya hai? So
You said many spheres. Spheres means many layers. In yeah.
See, approaches means the stand which you take to look at diaspora. Okay, the stand in which, for example, there are two kinds of approaches. One is methodological approach. For example, class perspective is an approach. Okay, so by this approach, you're trying to understand different classes within the diaspora and how they are connecting back to their homeland and what kind of issues and challenges they face in the host land. So this class approach will help you. So theoretical approach means you try to theorize, by looking at the various diasporic process. For example, there are two kinds of theoretical approach. One is essentialist approach and non-essentialist approach. See, the essentialist approach will try to understand diaspora looking at the cultural approach. Okay, how culture is maintained, okay, and who can be called as diaspora. Okay, by maintaining culture, maintaining their identity. So they're trying to maintain diasporic identity. That's called non-essentialist approach. The primordial approach. Okay, this is the non-primordial approaches, like how the diaspora is maintaining their identity by having different flows, that is business connections, trade connections, and other cultural, connections with the homeland. That is called non-essentialist approach, theoretical approach. Okay, so these kind of approaches are helping us to understand a phenomenon called diaspora. Okay, So I think it will help you to for your research. This topic basically will help you to frame your research proposal for your research. Okay, clear? Yes, it should be clear. What about Nirmal, Shiv Shankar? I think Feroz, it's time to wrap up, close down. I think no response from the floor.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for this wonderful lecture. And for the participants, if you have any question to Dr. Dipti or Mahalingam, sir, you can post your question after listening to their videos also. So they are ready to help you out if you have any doubt. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you
Thank
can
you.
post your questions in the group. We have a WhatsApp group. You can post your questions so we can answer your queries, comments, observations. No problem. You're always welcome. Okay. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. So now we are just closing the session and we are going to meet in the next session. Okay. Bye.
In
Thank you,
fact,
guys.
I like to thank Feroz Khan for organizing this year lecture because no technical issue. Okay, only yeah. Otherwise, we get some technical problem, but this time I think I did not face much problem. Maybe few minutes I could not, you could not hear me. Otherwise, I was audible and also it was very comfortable. So thank you, and also I thank all the students, and we can I won't call student, maybe I can say like you all good audience or participants, because you all very good, you know better than us because you have all field experience, you all working on the field. So thank you for joining and see you to next class. See you next class.
Thank you, sir.